He was a man who measured the world in dollars and cents, a titan of industry named Julian Croft, whose net worth eclipsed the GDP of small nations. She was Amelia Hayes, a woman who measured her life in double shifts and mounting medical bills, her dreams deferred and hidden behind a waitress's tired smile. They were two people from different universes, destined to collide for a few fleeting moments in a Michelin-starred restaurant. But in those moments, a single venomous word would set in motion a chain of events that would prove that true power isn't printed on money, but coded in brilliance. He called her uneducated. Seconds later, the machine that powered his entire world would deliver a verdict of its own, declined. This is the story of how one woman's hidden genius brought a billionaire to his knees. The Air in Ethelgard, a restaurant so exclusive it didn't have a sign, was thick with the scent of money and seared scallops. It was a low, humming symphony of clinking silverware against porcelain-murmured conversations about mergers and acquisitions, and the almost silent ballet of the waitstaff as they drifted between tables. For Amelia Hayes, it was the sound of survival. Each clink was a fraction of her rent, each murmured order a contribution to her father's staggering hospital bills. Tonight, her section included the most coveted and dreaded table in the establishment, the corner booth with a panoramic view of the city skyline, permanently reserved for Julian Croft. He arrived not with a quiet entrance, but with a gravitational pull his presence announced by the sudden stiffening of the manager's spine and the hushed whispers that followed in his wake. Croft was a man chiseled from arrogance and ambition. His suit was a bespoke creation by a tailor whose name was a secret, whispered only among the ultra-wealthy, and his watch, a Patek Philippe Nautilus, was worth more than the car Amelia drove, the apartment she rented, and the entirety of her student debt combined. He was flanked by two younger men, Mark and David, who looked like polished, eager clones, their faces a mixture of admiration and terror. Amelia approached the table with the practiced grace of a seasoned professional, her notepad held ready. Her uniform was immaculate, a crisp black dress and a starched white apron, a stark contrast to the exhaustion she felt deep in her bones. "Good evening, Mr. Croft. Gentlemen, my name is Amelia, and I'll be taking care of you this evening. May I start you with some water? We have a still mineral water from the Italian Alps or a sparkling from Norway." Julian Croft didn't look at her. He was busy scrolling through his phone, a sliver of glass and metal that seemed to contain the entire world. Without looking up, he waved a dismissive hand. "Whatever's most expensive. And bring a bottle of the 98 Petrus. Don't bother showing me the bottle, just make sure it's decanted properly. Your last girl nearly ruined a 05 Lafitte." The insult was delivered with the casual indifference of a man who swatted away servants like flies. Mark and David offered weak, sycophantic chuckles. Amelia's smile didn't falter, a mask of professional courtesy she had perfected over years of servitude. "Of course, sir. An excellent choice." She retreated her steps, measured her breathing even. Inside, a familiar fire burned. She wasn't just a waitress. She was, or had been, a top-tier computer science student at Stanford. She'd been on a full scholarship, on track to graduate summa cum laude, her mind a place of elegant algorithms and beautiful complex code. She could build worlds from scratch behind a keyboard. But then her father's heart had decided to fail, and the world of academia had been replaced by the world of appetizers and entrees. The scholarship didn't cover the cost of a triple bypass. When she returned with the wine, Julian was holding court, his voice a booming declaration of his own success. "And so I told the board disruption isn't about incremental change. It's about total annihilation of the old guard. Our new platform Aura isn't just a product. It's an extinction-level event for our competitors." He paused to allow Amelia to pour the wine. He sniffed it, swirled it, and took a sip, his expression one of intense, critical judgment. "Passable," he declared, as if bestowing a great honor. The meal progressed as a showcase of Croft's ego. He complained that the foie gras was a degree too warm. He sent back the wild sea base because the fennel puree was pedestrian. With each complaint, he would look at Amelia as if she had personally grown the fennel or seared the fish. He spoke to his companions, but made sure his criticisms were loud enough for her to hear each one a small cut. The final defining moment came with the dessert menu. Amelia, attempting to salvage the experience with genuine enthusiasm, offered a recommendation. "The chef has a special tonight, a deconstructed tiramisu with a cold-brewed espresso foam. It's really quite remarkable." Julian finally looked at her. His eyes, a cold, piercing blue, scanned her from head to toe, with a look of profound disdain. It was the kind of look one gives an inanimate object that has suddenly made a noise. He chuckled, a dry, grating sound. "Sweetheart," he said, the term of endearment dripping with poison. "Your job is to carry plates. My job is to make decisions that shape the future of global technology. I'll decide what's remarkable. Stick to what you know." He turned to Mark. "It's the problem with the service industry. You get all these uneducated people offering opinions they're not qualified to have." The word hung in the air, heavy and sharp. Uneducated. It struck Amelia with the force of a physical blow. All the late nights studying the complex theorems she'd mastered, the passion she had for a world he couldn't possibly comprehend, all of it erased by one man's casual cruelty. Her dream wasn't just deferred. In his eyes, it had never existed. Her face flushed, but her voice remained steady, a testament to her iron control. "I apologize, sir. I'll give you a few more moments to decide." She walked away from the table, her back straight, her dignity a shield. But inside, something had fractured. She wasn't just a servant to him, she was a lesser being, an object. The gilded cage of Ethelgard suddenly felt suffocating, its perfumed air impossible to breathe. She stood by the service station, taking a deep, shuddering breath, unaware that in a few short minutes, the universe was about to hand her a rebuttal far more eloquent than any words she could have spoken. The end of the meal was an exercise in theatrical magnanimity. Julian Croft, having asserted his dominance over the staff and the menu, leaned back in his chair, a modern-day king surveying his court. He regaled his two lieutenants with a final story of a rival he had crushed, his laughter echoing slightly too loud in the refined space. The bill, when it came, was presented in a small leather folio. The total was an eye-watering 7,845.21 ton. For Julian, it was pocket change. He waved Amelia over with an imperious flick of his wrist. "The check," he commanded, not asked. "Right here, sir," Amelia said, placing the folio on the table. Julian didn't even open it. He reached into his jacket and produced a wallet made of some exotic dark leather. From it, he slid out a piece of metal. It wasn't a normal credit card. It was a solid black card, heavy and sleek, with no numbers on its face, only his name and the logo of a private invitation-only financial institution, Onyx Reserve. It was a status symbol, a key that unlocked the world, designed to never ever be refused. He tossed it onto the table. "Run it," he said, a smug smile playing on his lips. He was already turning back to Mark, preparing to continue his monologue. The payment was a mere formality, a brief interruption in the grand performance of being Julian Croft. Amelia picked up the card. It felt cold and heavy in her hand. She walked to the point-of-sale terminal, her movements precise and automatic. She slid the card through the reader. She typed in the astronomical amount. She pressed Enter. A small, beep-like sound, and then a message on the screen in stark red letters: Transaction declined. Cardholder authentication failed. Amelia blinked. That wasn't possible. A card like this didn't get declined. It was likely a transient network error. She swiped it again, more deliberately this time. The machine whirred for a second longer. Transaction declined. A cold knot formed in her stomach. This was bad. She walked back to the table, her heart pounding a nervous rhythm against her ribs. She placed the card quietly beside Julian's wine glass. "I'm very sorry, Mr. Croft," she said, her voice a low, professional murmur. "It seems there's an issue with the terminal. The transaction was declined. Would you like me to try it again, or perhaps you have another card?" Julian stopped mid-sentence. The smug smile vanished from his face, replaced by a look of sheer disbelief. "What did you say? The card was declined, sir." He stared at her as if she'd just spoken in a foreign language. Then he looked at the card, then back at her. A dark flush began to creep up his neck. "Declined? Are you an idiot? That's an Onyx card. It doesn't get declined. You did something wrong. You probably don't know how to operate the machine." "I can assure you I operated it correctly, sir," Amelia said, her own voice hardening ever so slightly. "It's likely a network issue with the bank." "Don't tell me what it is." He snapped, his voice rising in volume. Other diners were beginning to cast curious glances their way. "Give it to me." He snatched the card and inspected it, as if Amelia might have physically damaged it. "Get your manager. Now." Amelia nodded and retreated to find Mr. Dubois, who was already hovering anxiously nearby, having sensed the shift in the atmosphere. He was a small, perpetually stressed man, whose career depended on keeping men like Julian Croft happy. "What is the problem, Amelia?" he hissed. "His card was declined." "Twice," she whispered back. Mr. Dubois' face went pale. He scurried to the table, bowing and scraping. "Mr. Croft, 1,000 apologies for this inconvenience. A technical gremlin, no doubt. Let me run it myself on our primary terminal in the back office. A more secure line." Julian shoved the card into the manager's hand. "Fix it." Mr. Dubois practically ran to the back office. The 5 minutes he was gone felt like an eternity at the table. Mark and David stared intently at their water glasses, desperate to be anywhere else. Julian's jaw was clenched so tight Amelia could see the muscles twitching. He glared at her, his eyes radiating pure venom. To him, this was her fault. Her incompetence was the only possible explanation. She was the flaw in his perfect, frictionless world. Mr. Dubois returned, his face now ashen. He was wringing his hands, a sheen of sweat on his brow. He leaned in close to Julian, his voice a panicked whisper. "Sir, my deepest apologies. It was declined again. I even called the Onyx concierge line directly. They said the account is under a temporary security freeze. All associated cards are locked." The silence that followed was deafening. A security freeze. The words hung in the air, thick with implication. For a man like Julian Croft, it was the equivalent of being publicly stripped naked. It wasn't about the money. It was about the power. And his power had just been inexplicably publicly shut off. His face cycled through a storm of emotions, shock rage, and then a deep, burning humiliation. He was Julian Croft. His assets weren't frozen. It was impossible. "That's a lie," he seethed, his voice low and dangerous. "That's a complete and utter lie." I'm only relaying what they told me, sir," stammered Mr. Dubois, Julian's fury needing a target settled squarely back on Amelia. "This is because of her," he snarled, pointing a trembling finger. "This never happens. She did something." "Sir, that's not possible," Amelia said, her patience finally snapping. "I just swiped the card. I don't have access to your bank accounts." "Do you have another form of payment, Mr. Croft?" Mr. Dubois asked timidly. With a look of utter disgust, Julian pulled out a second wallet and slapped another high-end card on the table, a Platinum American Express. "Try this one, and if it doesn't work, I'm buying this entire restaurant just so I can fire all of you personally." Mr. Dubois took the card and scurried away again. The result was the same. Declined. Account locked. The humiliation was now absolute. The great Julian Croft, the titan of tech, couldn't pay for his dinner. Mark, seeing his boss's apoplectic state, finally spoke up. "Sir, please allow me," he said quickly, pulling out his own corporate card. He handed it to Amelia, avoiding Julian's gaze. Amelia took the card and processed the payment. It went through instantly. The transaction was complete. but the air was still charged with toxic fallout. Julian Croft slowly rose from his seat, his face a mask of cold fury. He didn't look at his deputies. He didn't look at the manager. He looked only at Amelia. "I will not forget this." He promised, his voice barely a whisper, but carrying more menace than a shout. "I will have your job." He stormed out of the restaurant, his two followers scrambling behind him like pilot fish after a wounded shark. Amelia stood by the table, her hands trembling slightly. She had just witnessed the public neutering of a so-called master of the universe. But as she cleared the remnants of his lavish meal, a strange and unsettling thought began to form in the back of her mind. A security freeze. An account lock on a man like that wasn't random. It was surgical. And in the world she used to inhabit, the world of code and cybersecurity, surgical freezes, like that meant only one thing: a catastrophic digital breach was in progress. The door to Amelia's apartment clicked shut, closing out the noise of the city and sealing her into her own small world. The contrast to Ethelgard was jarring. Where the restaurant was all warm lighting, plush velvet, and expansive views, her apartment was a cramped studio in a walk-up building furnished with second-hand items and smelling faintly of old books and soldering flux. For most people, it was a place of rest. For Amelia, it was where her real work began. She ignored the small, lumpy bed and the kitchenette with its stack of unwashed dishes. Instead, she went to the large desk that dominated the room. It was an altar to a different life. Two large, high-resolution monitors sat side by side, flanked by a custom-built computer tower that hummed with quiet power. Wires snaked across the floor like vines. Amelia shed her waitress uniform, the symbol of her public identity, and pulled on a worn, comfortable hoodie. She sat down, her fingers finding the familiar contours of her mechanical keyboard. With a few keystrokes, the monitors flickered to life, not with a standard desktop, but with multiple windows of cascading green and black text. This was her sanctuary. This was her true self. 2 months ago, desperation had led her to reconnect with her old mentor from Stanford, Professor Albright. She had explained her situation, her father, the bills, the soul-crushing job. He had listened with sympathy, and then made an unusual offer. A contact of his working for a private cybersecurity firm was looking for freelance penetration testers. They needed anonymous skilled coders, white-hat hackers, to legally probe the defenses of their corporate clients and find vulnerabilities before malicious actors could. The pay was extraordinary, but the work was intense and done through a completely anonymized, encrypted portal. She would be known only by a handle, Nyx, the Greek goddess of the night. For the past 3 weeks, Nyx had been assigned to a single massive client, Croft Innovations. Her mission was to test the security of their new flagship platform, Aura, before its global launch. From her tiny apartment, Amelia as Nyx had spent over 100 hours mapping the digital architecture of Julian Croft's empire. It was, she had to admit, a fortress. But every fortress had a crack, and 2 nights ago she had found it. It wasn't a crack, it was a hairline fracture, a tiny overlooked vulnerability in a legacy subroutine that handled executive payment processing. It was a ghost in the machine, a backdoor so subtle and brilliantly disguised that Croft's entire internal security team had missed it. Following the digital thread, she had burrowed deeper, and what she found had made her blood run cold. Embedded deep within the core code was a piece of malware unlike anything she had ever seen. It was a sophisticated logic bomb, a digital parasite waiting for a specific trigger. When activated, it wouldn't just steal data, it would execute a cascade of commands designed to irrevocably corrupt the entire Aura platform, bricking the hardware and wiping the servers clean. It was corporate sabotage on a scale that would be legendary. The launch of Aura would not just fail, it would be a multi-billion-dollar mushroom cloud. The malware was also programmed with a secondary protocol. If it detected a high-level security probe like hers, it would initiate a series of defensive countermeasures. It would create phantom data trails, clone itself to backup servers, and most critically, It would trigger automated security lockdowns on any high-value financial accounts linked directly to the system it had infected. It was a way to create chaos and distract the security team, a digital smokescreen. Amelia brought up the logs from the past hour. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, her eyes scanning lines of code with the fluency of a musician reading a sheet of music. And then she saw it. A timestamp from approximately 45 minutes ago. Alert anomalous probe detected in subroutine exec pay. Initiating def protocol gamma. Target accounts: J. Croft Onyx Priv Fin, J. Croft Amex Corp Plat Action. Temporary asset freeze. Reason potential compromise. Amelia leaned back in her chair, a wave of dizziness washing over her. The screen's glow illuminated a look of dawning, horrified comprehension on her face. It wasn't a network error. It wasn't a banking mistake. Julian Croft's cards had been declined at the restaurant because of her. Her probing of the system, her discovery of the malware had tripped the wire. The logic bomb in its own defense had automatically frozen the very accounts linked to the man who owned the company. The humiliation he had suffered tonight wasn't a cosmic coincidence or karma. It was a direct, albeit unintentional consequence of her own brilliant work as Nyx. The irony was staggering, almost nauseating. The man who had called her uneducated, who had dismissed her as a simpleton fit only to carry plates, had just been publicly humbled by a system he owned, a system that was reacting to the very person he had insulted. He had been belittling the ghost in his own machine. A grim, humorless smile touched her lips. For a moment she felt a surge of vindictive satisfaction. It was a perfect poetic justice. He deserved it. But the feeling quickly evaporated, replaced by the cold, heavy weight of the bigger picture. This wasn't about a declined credit card anymore. This was about a logic bomb set to detonate in less than 72 hours, coinciding with the global launch of Aura. It would vaporize Croft Innovations, bankrupt thousands of employees, and send shockwaves through the tech industry. And she, Amelia Nyx Hayes, was the only person on Earth who knew exactly where the bomb was and how to disarm it. She had been about to draft her report through the encrypted portal, a standard procedure. But now everything had changed. The abstract corporate client now had a face, and it was the face of the man who had looked at her like she was nothing. The 27th floor of Croft Tower was a realm of controlled panic. Here, in the heart of Croft Innovations' security operations center, the air was cold, and the light was a perpetual blue-white glow from a wall of monitors displaying scrolling data network maps and threat assessments. This was Catherine Vance's domain, and right now her domain was under siege. Catherine was the head of cybersecurity, a woman with a formidable reputation, a sharp mind, and a tolerance for pressure that was currently being tested to its absolute limit. She stood before the main screen, her arms crossed, watching the frantic, fruitless efforts of her best analysts. They were chasing ghosts. For the past 12 hours, their most sensitive systems had been behaving erratically. Alarms were being tripped by phantom intrusions, data packets were vanishing, and a deep, gut-wrenching feeling of wrongness had settled over her team. They knew there was a breach. What they didn't know was its nature or its scale. All they knew was that the anonymous white-hat consultant they'd hired, a contractor known only as Nyx, had suddenly gone dark. Nyx had been making steady, documented progress for weeks, filing meticulous reports. Then, 24 hours ago, the reports had stopped. The only communication had been a single cryptic high-priority flag on the legacy payment subroutine, the very system that had just imploded at Ethelgard. The door to the command center hissed open, and Julian Croft stormed in. He looked even worse than he had at the restaurant. His tie was loosened, his face was pale with fury, and he was radiating an aura of such intense rage that several junior analysts visibly flinched. "Vance, what in the hell is going on?" He boomed, his voice echoing in the tense silence. "My finances are frozen. My personal accounts, my corporate lines, everything. The banks are telling me it's an internal security flag from our end. Explain." Catherine turned to face him. her expression a careful mask of professional calm. "We have a situation, Julian. We have a significant unidentified threat within the Aura network. We believe it's a dormant payload, but we can't pinpoint its location or function." "A threat? We've spent $500 million on security," he roared. "What about this ghost hacker you hired, this Nix? Where is he?" "We don't know Nix's gender or location. That's the point of the anonymous contract," Catherine replied, her voice clipped. "And Nix has gone silent. We believe they may have found something big enough that they broke standard communication protocols. The system lockdowns you're experiencing are likely automated defense measures triggered by Nix's probe getting too close to the threat." Julian's face contorted with rage. "So let me get this straight. I am paying an anonymous hacker to break into my own system. In the process, they trigger a lockdown that publicly humiliates me and freezes my entire net worth, and now they've vanished. Is that the summary? That is the current operational theory?" "Yes," Catherine said, refusing to be cowed. "This is unacceptable." Julian slammed his hand on a console, making an analyst jump. "The Aura launches in 2 days. Our stock is priced for a flawless debut. If word of a breach gets out, we're finished. Find this Nix, I don't care what it takes. Unmask them. I want to know who is holding my company hostage. Our contract with the intermediary firm guarantees total anonymity. We can't unmask them without breaching a dozen international privacy laws. Our only option is to wait for them to re-establish contact." Catherine explained, though she too was deeply frustrated by the situation. They were flying blind. Julian began pacing like a caged tiger. His world was built on control, and for the first time in decades he had none. He was at the mercy of a faceless entity, a ghost in his own machine. His mind, reeling from the public and private indignities of the past few hours, latched onto the one tangible focus for his anger, the waitress. The girl with the calm, steady eyes who had witnessed his ultimate embarrassment. She was a symbol of the chaos of face for the universe's sudden, inexplicable betrayal. He stopped pacing, a cold, cruel idea forming in his mind. He couldn't punish the ghost, but he could punish the witness. He pulled out his phone, his fingers jabbing at the screen. He found the number for Ethelgard. Mr. Dubois answered on the first ring, his voice trembling with anxiety. "Mr. Croft, is everything all right, sir?" "No, it is not." Julian said, his voice like ice. "The waitress, the one at my table tonight, Amelia." "Yes, sir, Amelia. She's fired. I don't want to hear that she works there another day. Her incompetence and her attitude were a disgrace. If she is still on your payroll by morning, I will make it my personal mission to see to it that your restaurant is blacklisted by every CEO, banker, and socialite in this city. Am I clear?" There was a moment of horrified silence on the other end of the line. Mr. Dubois knew it was unfair. Amelia was one of his best, but he also knew Julian Croft was a man who did not make idle threats. "Crystal clear, Mr. Croft." The manager finally choked out. "It will be handled." Julian hung up without another word. It was a petty, vindictive act, but it gave him a fleeting, hollow sense of control. He had reasserted his power in the one small way he still could. He had erased the uneducated girl from his world. Back in the restaurant, a crestfallen Mr. Dubois found Amelia polishing silverware at the service station, her shift almost over. He called her into his office, his face a mask of regret. "Amelia," he began, unable to meet her eyes. "I don't know how to say this." She saw the look on his face, and she knew. The knot in her stomach returned colder and heavier than before. "He called, didn't he?" she said, her voice flat. Mr. Dubois could only nod, his expression miserable. "I'm so sorry," he said. "He said if I didn't let you go, he'd ruin us. My hands are tied. You have to understand." Amelia stood there, the silver polished cloth still in her hand. Fired. Fired for a crime she didn't commit by a man whose entire digital existence she was single-handedly and secretly trying to save. The injustice was so profound, it almost felt absurd. She had lost her dream, and now she had lost the menial job that was barely keeping that dream's embers alive. She was left with nothing. Nothing except the key to a multi-billion-dollar kingdom. The termination notice felt like a lead weight in Amelia's pocket as she walked home through the sleeping city. The adrenaline from the night had worn off, leaving behind a profound, hollow ache. Fired. The word was a final judgment, a confirmation of her place in Julian Croft's world. She was disposable. She let herself into her apartment, and for a long moment she just stood in the darkness, the faint glow of her computer monitors casting long shadows on the walls. One life, the life of Amelia Hayes' waitress, had just been extinguished by a billionaire's whim. But the other life, the life of Nix, held that same billionaire's fate in the palm of her hand. She sank into her chair, the weight of her choice pressing down on her. She could do nothing. She could simply walk away. She could delete the data, sever the connection, and let the logic bomb detonate. She could watch from the sidelines as Croft Innovations crumbled into digital dust. It would be justice. It would be revenge for every condescending remark, for every casual cruelty, for the final brutal act of having her fired. It would be a lesson for a man who believed wealth gave him the right to treat other human beings like dirt. The thought was seductive, a dark and satisfying fantasy. She imagined his face, the rage and disbelief, turning to despair as he watched his empire, his legacy, his entire identity vaporize before his eyes. But then another image crept into her mind. Not of Julian Croft, but of the thousands of other people who worked for him. The coders, the engineers, the marketing assistants, the janitors. People like her with bills to pay and families to support. Their livelihoods were tied to the survival of the company. Their lives would be thrown into chaos. And for what her personal vengeance was her wounded pride worth the ruin of so many innocent people? Her gaze drifted to a framed photograph on her small bookshelf. It was of her and her father, taken years ago on a hiking trip. He was a man who had worked as a public school teacher his whole life, a man who believed in integrity above all else. Doing the right thing is easy when it costs you nothing, Amy, he used to say. Character is what you do when it costs you everything. What would he say now? Torn, she did the only thing she could think of. She initiated a secure, encrypted call to Professor Albright. He picked up immediately, his voice warm but concerned. She had already alerted him to the severity of the breach, but now she told him everything else: the dinner, the insult, the declined card getting fired. She laid bare the entire surreal story. He listened patiently without interruption. When she finished, the silence on the line was profound. Amelia, he finally said, his voice heavy with empathy. What he did to you is inexcusable. It is a gross abuse of power, and my every instinct is screaming for you to let him reap what he has sown. He paused. But you and I both know that's not who you are. You're a builder, not a destroyer. Your talent, your very nature is to solve problems, to create order out of chaos, not the other way around. He called me uneducated, Professor. She whispered the words, still stinging. He fired me because his own security system, which I'm trying to fix, locked him out. I know, Albright said gently. The irony is almost biblical. But this decision isn't about him anymore. It's about you. It's about the kind of person you want to be. Do you let his toxicity poison you, or do you rise above it and act with the integrity I know you possess? This isn't just about code, Amelia. It's about your own. His words hit their mark. He was right. To let Croft's company burn out of spite would be to become like him, someone who let their own ego cause collateral damage to countless others. It would be a betrayal of everything her father had taught her, everything Professor Albright had seen in her. Her resolve hardened. She would save the company. But she wouldn't do it from the shadows. She wouldn't be the anonymous, disposable ghost anymore. If she was going to save Julian Croft from himself, He was going to look her in the eye when she did it. He was going to know without a shadow of a doubt who was saving him. She ended the call with the professor and turned back to her keyboard. Her fingers, which had been trembling with anger and indecision just moments before, were now steady and purposeful. She would not be filing a report through the anonymous portal. She was done being Nyx. She began to type, her mind clear and focused. She opened a direct encrypted communication channel, bypassing the intermediary firm and targeting the one person who would understand the technical gravity of the situation, Catherine Vance, head of cybersecurity Croft Innovations. The message was brief and direct. To C. Vance, head sec Croft InV, from Nyx subject Re-Aura catastrophic vulnerability. I have located the payload. It is a polymorphic logic bomb embedded in the Aura OS kernel, disguised as a data compression algorithm. It is set to trigger on launch 0900 PST in 48 hours. It will cause total system failure. Your internal scans cannot find it. I can disarm it, but I will not do so remotely. My services as an anonymous contractor are hereby terminated. I will deliver the solution in person. My conditions are non-negotiable. 1. A private meeting with you and CEO Julian Croft. No one else. 2. Full unrestricted administrative access to the Aura source code. 3. My identity will be revealed at the meeting. You have 1 hour to respond with a time and location. After that, this offer is rescinded. The fate of your company is in your hands. She hit send. The message shot through the digital ether, a declaration of war against one man's prejudice and an ultimatum that would force a king to kneel before the ghost he never knew existed. Catherine Vance saw the message appear on her private terminal. It bypassed all the standard channels, a ghost slipping through the cracks of her secure network, a feat that was in itself a demonstration of terrifying skill. The subject line made her blood run cold. She read the message once, then twice, her mind racing. Polymorphic logic bomb, disguised as a compression algorithm. It was brilliant. It was diabolical. It was exactly the kind of elegant, horrific threat that would sail past every one of her team's defenses. Nyx wasn't just a white-hat hacker. Nyx was a virtuoso. The message wasn't a threat. It was a lifeline with incredibly strange conditions attached. She stormed out of the security center and went straight to the top floor to Julian Croft's penthouse office. He was hunched over his desk, barking into the phone at what sounded like the president of a Swiss bank. Catherine didn't wait for him to finish. She strode to his desk and placed her tablet in front of him, displaying the message from Nyx. Julian finished his call and slammed the phone down. "What is it now, Catherine?" he snarled. "It's Nyx," she said. "Read it." He read the message, his brow furrowed in concentration. The anger on his face slowly morphed into a grudging, fearful respect. "In person. With me, who does this person think they are? They think they're the only person who can save us." Catherine countered her tone, leaving no room for argument. "And based on the technical details in this message, I believe them. The launch is in less than 2 days. We have no leads and no time. We have no other choice, Julian. We accept their terms." Julian stared at the message, his jaw tight. Being cornered was a foreign and deeply unpleasant sensation. He, the master manipulator, was being manipulated. But the alternative, the complete annihilation of his life's work, was unthinkable. "Fine," he bit out. "Arrange it. The main boardroom. In 1 hour. Tell them." Catherine sent the encrypted reply, "Accepted." Main boardroom, Croft Tower. 1 hour. The next hour was the longest of Julian Croft's life. He and Catherine sat in the cavernous boardroom on the 50th floor, a sterile space of glass and steel overlooking the city. The silence was thick with tension. Julian imagined who Nyx might be, a rival hacker from a competitor, a disgruntled ex-employee. He pictured a shadowy figure in a hoodie, a pale, arrogant young man who would relish lording this victory over him. Catherine, meanwhile, was just hoping Nyx was as good as they claimed to be. Her entire career was hanging by a thread, woven by a complete unknown. At precisely the agreed-upon time, the frosted glass doors to the boardroom slid open with a soft hiss. A figure stood silhouetted in the doorway. It wasn't the arrogant young man Julian had pictured. It was a woman. She stepped into the light, and Julian Croft's world tilted on its axis. It was the waitress. Amelia Hayes stood before them. She wasn't wearing her server's uniform. She was dressed in simple dark trousers and a plain gray sweater. She held a laptop bag in one hand. Her hair was pulled back, and her eyes, the same calm, steady eyes from the restaurant, held no trace of fear. They held only focus. Julian stared, his mouth slightly agape. His brain struggled to reconcile the two realities. The uneducated waitress, the master hacker, the woman he had casually destroyed just hours ago, the woman who now held the keys to his kingdom. It was impossible. It was a hallucination. "You—" He breathed the word, a mixture of shock and utter disbelief. Catherine looked from Julian's stunned face to the young woman at the door, and for the first time, a flicker of understanding dawned. She didn't know the story, but she could see there was a story. "You're Nix?" Catherine asked, her voice quiet. "I am," Amelia said, her voice clear and even. She walked further into the room, her footsteps silent on the polished concrete floor. She looked directly at Julian, whose face was a storm of conflicting emotions, confusion, rage, horror, and a dawning, terrifying humiliation that dwarfed what he had felt at the restaurant. "But how?" he stammered. "You're a waitress." A faint, ironic smile touched Amelia's lips. "I was," she corrected him. "You saw to that. You were right about one thing, Mr. Croft. I should stick to what I know." She walked past him to the head of the long boardroom table and placed her laptop down. She looked at Catherine. "The logic bomb is set to replicate and execute in 47 hours and 12 minutes. We don't have time for a long question and answer session. I need administrative access, now." Her transformation was absolute. The subservient waitress was gone. In her place was a commander, an expert taking charge of a crisis. She was no longer Amelia Hayes, the woman he had dismissed. She was Nix, and this was her domain. Julian Croft sank into his chair, utterly speechless. He had looked at this woman and seen nothing of value. A blank slate, an uneducated menial. And he had been catastrophically, biblically wrong. The ghost in his machine had a face, and it was the face of the woman he had tried to break. The boardroom became a war room. The initial shock that had paralyzed Julian Croft gave way to the frantic energy of the crisis. Amelia now fully in her element, as Nix was a force of nature. She directed Catherine with a calm authority, speaking a language of code and protocol that left Julian feeling like a foreigner in his own company. "I need a direct port to the primary server core," Amelia commanded, connecting her own heavily customized laptop to their network. "Isolate it from the wider network. I'm going to create a virtual sandbox to trap the payload before I can attempt to neutralize it." Catherine, deeply impressed, relayed the orders to her team through her earpiece. Within minutes, the infrastructure was in place. On the massive screen at the end of the boardroom, lines of code began to scroll a visual representation of the digital battle Amelia was waging. Her fingers danced across her keyboard with a speed and precision that was mesmerizing. She wasn't just typing. She was composing, thinking, and executing in real time. Julian watched, silent and sidelined. For the first time, he was seeing true genius up close, and it looked nothing like he had ever imagined. It wasn't loud or boastful. It was quiet, focused, and utterly dominant. He watched this young woman whom he had deemed worthless navigate the most complex digital architecture his company had ever built with the ease of someone walking through their own home. She was pointing out flaws, exploiting weaknesses he didn't know existed, and fighting an invisible enemy he hadn't even known was there. "There," Amelia said suddenly, pointing to a section of the code on the big screen. That's the polymorphic engine. It rewrites its own signature every 10 minutes. That's why your antivirus scans never caught it. It was never the same virus twice. She explained her plan to Catherine. It was elegant daring and incredibly high risk. Instead of trying to delete the logic bomb, which could trigger it prematurely, she would write a counter-script, a hunter-killer algorithm. This script would mimic the trigger signal for the bomb, luring it into a quarantined section of the server, the sandbox, and then once it was trapped, the script would deconstruct it piece by piece, while simultaneously logging its origin signature. It's a trap. Catherine breathed a look of awe on her face. You're not just disarming it, you're performing a live autopsy. For the next several hours, Amelia worked. The tension in the room was palpable. The future of a multi-billion-dollar corporation rested on the shoulders of a woman who a day earlier had been worried about making rent. Finally, with a last flurry of keystrokes, she stopped. "It's done!" she announced, her voice tired but triumphant. "The payload is neutralized. The hunter script is cleaning up the fragments now." She typed another command. "And I have a source. The attack originated from an IP address traced back to the R&D servers of your biggest competitor, Sterling Gray. The proof is all here. They weren't just trying to sabotage your launch, they were trying to steal the Aura source code." Catherine's team verified the findings. It was all there. Irrefutable proof. Amelia hadn't just saved the company. She had delivered the weapon that would allow Croft to legally obliterate his competition. Amelia leaned back, the adrenaline finally leaving her. She packed her laptop, her job done. She had fulfilled her end of the bargain. The silence in the room was broken by Julian. He rose slowly from his chair. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a look of profound, humbled exhaustion. He had been stripped of his pride, his power, and his prejudice all in one night. He walked over to Amelia. He started, his voice rough. "I was wrong. What I said to you, what I did, there is no excuse." It was a clumsy, difficult apology from a man who had likely never uttered one before. Amelia met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "No," she said simply. "There isn't." He flinched, but he knew she was right. "What you've done here, it's beyond remarkable. I want to offer you a job, any job. Name your price." Amelia looked at him, and for the first time she saw not a titan, but a flawed, broken man. She had the power now. "I don't want a job," she said. Julian's face fell. "I want a new division." She continued, her voice gaining strength. "An independent cybersecurity and threat analysis division. I will be its director. I will report directly to the board, not to you. My team will have complete autonomy and veto power over any product launch that does not meet our security standards. My salary will be 7 figures, and the company will establish a $10 million STEM scholarship fund for underprivileged students to be managed by an independent committee which I will chair. Finally, you will fund a full ride for me to complete my degree at Stanford whenever I choose to do so." She paused, letting her terms sink in. "Those are my conditions. The ledger of what you owe is far greater than one night's dinner bill, Mr. Croft. This is the first payment." Catherine Vance stared at Amelia, a slow smile spreading across her face. Julian looked at this young woman, poised, brilliant, and utterly in control, and he knew he had no choice. He had underestimated her at every turn, and she had outmaneuvered him completely. He extended his hand. "Welcome to Croft Innovations, Director Hayes." Amelia shook his hand, her grip firm. The power dynamic had not just shifted, it had been completely rewritten. She had walked into Ethelgard as a waitress, invisible and dismissed. She walked out of Croft Tower as one of its most powerful executives, the architect of her own destiny, leaving a humbled billionaire in her wake, forever changed by the uneducated woman who had saved his world. The story of Amelia Hayes and Julian Croft is a powerful reminder that we should never judge a book by its cover. In a world that so often measures a person's worth by their job title or their bank account, we forget that brilliance, resilience, and strength can be found in the most unexpected of places. Amelia's journey from a humble waitress to a titan of the tech world wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming her own narrative and proving that true value lies in character skill and integrity qualities no amount of money can buy. It's a testament to the idea that sometimes the people we dismiss most easily are the very ones who hold the power to change our world. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next real-life drama. What did you think of Julian's actions? Let us know in the comments below.